The ocean virus that controls your brain. What if the ocean isn't just shaping the planet's climate, but quietly shaping your thoughts? I know, that sounds like the setup for a B-movie where a sea monster gets a psychology degree. But stay with me, because beneath those waves is an entire world of microbes and viruses fine-tuning behavior, not just in fish or plankton, but in subtle and unnerving ways in us too. Forget Poseidon swinging his trident. This is a molecular version of divine mood swings, and we're part of the forecast. Scientists call it behavioral manipulation. I call it nature's most unsettling version of remote control. These organisms don't crash your system. They update your code line by line, turn their hosts into what biologists jokingly describe as slow-motion zombies. No spinning heads, no green goo, just tiny molecular edits that shift instincts, choices, and even emotions to serve a parasite's agenda. And the weird part? It works. The ocean is crawling with mind hackers, biological programmers that have been fine-tuning their methods for over 1 billion years. Every drop of seawater holds millions of viruses, swapping genetic instructions the way humans share memes. Some crash their hosts outright. Others get subtle, whispering to cells, hey, maybe photosynthesize a little differently. Maybe swim toward the light instead of away from it. It's bizarrely polite mind control, but mind control all the same. Here's the promise. By the end of the story, you'll see the invisible thread connecting plankton pulsing in the deep sea to the moods, risks, and compulsions of the human brain. Because once you realize how many life forms on this planet are being neurologically steered by microbes, the difference between them and us starts to blur. My favorite part is that ancient myths accidentally predicted this. The Greeks had Poseidon, a god whose emotions ruled the ocean and supposedly the minds of sailors. When storms erupted, they said Poseidon was furious. When the sea calmed, he'd found peace again. But what if that legend was just an early attempt to describe something real, an unseen force rising from the ocean, influencing behavior with microscopic precision rather than divine anger? Modern science hasn't replaced that story. It's made it stranger and funnier. We now know some marine parasites can hijack a fish's brain chemistry so completely that it performs a please-eat-me dance for predators. Microbes on land pull similar stunts, tweaking mammalian fear circuits and judgment like understudies of Poseidon himself. The mythic imagery, sirens luring sailors, sea spirits clouding judgment, turns out to have a biochemical translation. Those spells were neurotransmitters all along. Serotonin dips, dopamine surges, and invisible molecular tridents carving decisions in the nervous systems, including ours. Think of it as the slow-motion version of zombification. Instead of turning creatures into drooling husks overnight, the ocean's microbes edit tiny scripts inside their nervous systems, step by step, until the host no longer realizes who's writing the code. It's not mind control with flash and thunder, it's persuasion through chemistry. And humans? We love to pretend we're separate from all that. But we're still walking tidepools, bags of seawater redesigned over eons. Traces of marine DNA persist in us, relics of ancient infections and symbiotic mergers that helped sculpt the very neurons now pondering their origin story. We eat seafood, inhale marine aerosols, and swim through microbial messaging every time we step into the surf. The same viruses that steer plankton's behavior brush against our physiology through food, air, and immune interaction. The question isn't whether the ocean can influence our minds, it's how often it's already doing so. So when people talk about the ocean as Earth's heartbeat, they're underselling it. It's more like the planet's neural network, firing electrical and molecular signals through currents and cells. The next time you stand by the shore feeling oddly calm, inspired, or uneasy, don't just blame nostalgia. Somewhere beneath those waves, an ancient intelligence may be whispering in biological code, reminding you that your thoughts have always belonged partly to the sea. The ocean's invisible hive mind. If you could scoop up a single drop of seawater and zoom in, you find more living things than there are people on the entire planet. That's not an exaggeration, it's biological fact. Every milliliter of ocean water contains millions of viruses and bacteria. Together they make up what scientists sometimes call the invisible majority. And honestly, that nickname undersells them. These microbes don't just populate the ocean, they choreograph it. They form an unseen hive mind pulsing through saltwater, directing the chemistry that keeps Earth alive, and in a roundabout way keeps us thinking. To most of us, the ocean is a bunch of waves and fish. But Beneath the plankton and whales is a microscopic traffic jam of viral particles constantly hijacking microbial machinery. Picture a trillion tiny programmers rewriting biological software 24 hours a day. They burst into bacteria, borrow chunks of genetic code, and plug them into new hosts, like hackers patching one app with code stolen from another. Scientists have found ocean viruses carrying borrowed genes that change how their hosts metabolize nutrients or absorb sunlight. Think of it as biochemical puppeteering. The virus whispers, "Make extra energy for me," and the host complies, none the wiser. Here's where it gets wild. These microscopic exchanges aren't just minor tune-ups. They reshape planetary systems. When a virus infects a photosynthetic microbe like cyanobacteria, it can alter the way that microbe captures carbon or releases oxygen. Multiply that by 10 to the 30th power. Yes, that's a 1 with 30 zeros. And you start to realize that the planet's climate, its carbon balance, even the oxygen you're inhaling right now, all depend on how well this viral hive mind is humming along. In other words, the weather forecast might start with a cloud of viruses. Plankton, the ocean's invisible grass, produce about half of the oxygen we breathe. Their behavior when they bloom, sink, or die depends heavily on viral infections. When these microbes get taken over, they behave differently. They might photosynthesize less, divide slower, or rupture faster, spilling nutrients that feed new life. Each microscopic death fuels another organism, cascading upward until it touches everything from jellyfish migrations to tuna populations. So yes, if you've ever eaten sushi, you're technically participating in a food web partially orchestrated by microscopic assassins. Now let's zoom out. Imagine billions of these infections happening simultaneously across every ocean basin. They collectively determine how carbon is sequestered, how nutrients flow, and whether algae blooms, thrive, or collapse. It's as if the planet's thermostat is controlled by an army of invisible engineers engaged in ceaseless cyber warfare. Some viruses kill their hosts instantly, others integrate gently, converting cells into semi-enslaved partners that churn out viral components while carrying on like nothing's wrong. The ocean remains stable, only because these tiny saboteurs keep the ecosystem perpetually in check. And we're not talking about niche players. Marine viruses outnumber all other life combined, and new species are discovered every time we try to count them. They infect everything from single-celled algae to shrimp, sponges, and possibly even unknown higher organisms. Each infection changes how energy moves through the ecosystem. You could say that the ocean has moods: calm, stormy, productive, starving, and that those moods are driven by microbial chemistry more than temperature or tides. Neptune's trident, if you believe the old myth, stirred the seas when the god was angry. But if Neptune existed today, he'd probably be made of RNA. The irony is that this invisible hive mind behaves almost like a planetary nervous system. Each infection sends tiny feedback signals through the ecosystem. Viral lysis releases carbon that feeds bacteria, which in turn influence algae, which affect fish behavior, which shapes entire food webs. The process loops endlessly, resembling the feedback mechanisms inside a brain. Signals spark, responses ripple, and somewhere down the chain a coral reef thrives or starves. In some weird poetic sense, Earth is thinking through its oceans, and the neurons are viruses. Here's the kicker. We live downstream of that thinking. Every breath, every calorie, every mood that improves when you're near the beach, it all ties back to the microbial struggle you can't see. These viruses determine which algae bloom and which die, affecting how much dimethyl sulfide, yes, the chemical that gives the ocean its smell, gets released into the air. That compound seeds clouds and influences rainfall. So when sailors in ancient tales swore the sea could summon storms out of spite, they weren't completely wrong. They just didn't know they were describing atmospheric chemistry triggered by microscopic hijackings. Humans like to think of thoughts as exclusively ours, but spend enough time watching the ocean's data stream under a microscope and you start to wonder, if marine viruses can rewrite the decisions of microscopic organisms so easily, pushing them toward light or shadow, gathering or dispersing, why couldn't similar influences ripple upward through evolution? After all, those microbes are the foundation of every food chain that ends with us. Their behavior sets the stage for everything built on top of it. Plants, animals, and the brains currently pondering this uncomfortable truth. We might even owe our existence to their meddling. Viral genes have been merging into host genomes for billions of years, leaving a molecular fossil, record inside our DNA. Some of the genetic elements that help create memories or control immune responses today began as viral insertions. The ocean was the testing ground for that symbiosis. It's fair to say the line between infection and creation has always been blurry. So the next time you hear the rhythmic crash of waves and feel yourself zone out a little, that calm might not be purely psychological. It might be evolutionary muscle memory, a quiet recognition that the same patterns controlling tides also pulse through our cells. We're not separate from the ocean's hive mind. We're a late-arriving branch of it, creatures built from the echo of countless viral negotiations in saltwater. If that sounds unsettling, good, it's supposed to, because the ocean's microscopic puppet masters don't stop with microbes. Some have graduated to bigger stages, fish, crustaceans, even mammals, running a full-scale production of biochemical theater where brains perform scripts they didn't write. And somewhere between cast and audience sits us, descendants of the sea still taking biochemical direction from its oldest playwrights, when fish become puppets. The moment scientists first spotted a tiny California killifish, twisting and darting toward the surface like it had just invented interpretive dance, they knew something strange was going on. Normally, these fish are the definition of cautious, hugging the muddy bottom, hiding from birds, just trying to live another day. But infected killifish? They go full Broadway, flipping and flashing until a hungry heron swoops down and snatches them up. The star of this bizarre show is a trematode parasite named Euplorchus californiensis, and if there were an award for most theatrical manipulation, it would win with ease. Here's how it works. The parasite begins life in a snail, gets released into the water, and finds its way into a passing fish. Once inside, it migrates straight to the fish's brain, where it sets up hundreds, sometimes thousands of cysts. Think of them as microscopic control hubs, each tapping into the fish's nervous system. Instead of killing the host, the parasite rewires it. Scientists have measured changes in serotonin levels so dramatic that infected fish behave like they've been slipped a double espresso and a dare. Their fear responses collapse. They swim near the surface, shimmer in the sunlight, and practically beg to be eaten, because that's exactly what the parasite wants. For the trematode, the story continues only when a bird eats the infected fish. The parasite reproduces in the bird's gut, lays eggs, and they're pooped back into the water to start again. It's a perfect biological subscription cycle. The fish, of course, doesn't make it to the next season. In evolutionary terms, Euplorchus is not just a parasite, it's a playwright, choreographing a suicidal ballet that ensures its own reproduction. Evolution turns out to be an exceptional director. Minimal cast, consistent reviews, guaranteed audience. And this isn't a one-off fluke. Well, technically it is a fluke, but you get the point. Across the marine world, parasites are master behavioral engineers. Take the humble goby. When infected by parasitic copepods, its entire confidence system collapses. Uninfected gobies are like savvy bar brawlers, ducking, weaving, and grabbing the best hiding spots. Infected ones, meanwhile, lose every territorial dispute they start. One study found that even when they had a size advantage, parasitized gobies lost over 20% of their fights. It's as if the parasites installed an invisible do not disturb sign in their courage centers. The result? Exposed gobies become easier prey. The parasites, as usual, catch a free ride to their next host. Then there's Eurodactylus salaris, the microscopic horror show tormenting salmon in northern rivers. This one doesn't need special effects. It just multiplies until the fish's skin and stress systems collapse. The infected salmon become lethargic, erratic, and far less likely to survive even mild environmental changes. Entire populations have crashed because of it. If you're a parasite watching from the sidelines, it's a box office hit. For everyone else, it's ecological tragedy meets body horror. Science fiction keeps inventing new ways that aliens could hijack human minds, but the ocean has been running that storyline for millions of years. These parasites don't use hypnosis or high-tech implants. They manipulate our ancestors' cousins through neurochemistry. Want a fish to swim in the open water? Dampen its stress hormones. Need it to twirl for predators? Tweak its serotonin. Nature has essentially discovered psychopharmacology on its own dime, and it's not generous about sharing patents. What fascinates biologists is how precise this control can be. The trematode's timing is impeccable. The fish only starts its flashy behavior once the parasite is mature enough to infect a bird. That's like hitting send on an email. Exactly when the boss is checking their inbox. Some parasites even appear to adjust their manipulation based on daylight or season, hinting at an awareness, well, not conscious, but biochemical, of the environment outside their host. Evolution doesn't need intent, it just needs consistency. The parasites that best time the performance survive, and the fish that can't resist the urge to dance become unwitting stage props in the story of life. It's tempting to laugh until you realize how deep this rabbit hole, or fish hole, really goes. Every time these manipulations succeed, the predator's feeding pattern, the bird's migration route, even nitrogen levels in the estuary are affected. The death dance of a single killifish can ripple through entire food webs. That's why ecologists call parasites ecosystem architects. Though underwater PR managers might fit better, they manage the public image of risk itself. And absurdly, it all works so smoothly that even the host's body chemistry agrees. Infected fish show a suppressed stress response, meaning they're physiologically calmer as they swim straight toward death. Imagine if, moments before you walked into traffic, your cortisol dropped and you felt serene about it. From a storytelling perspective, it's almost poetic, calm except scripted by a free-loading worm. Now, before you comfort yourself with, well, at least I'm not a fish, maybe pause. Humans aren't as immune to neurological persuasion as we'd like to think. Entire pharmaceutical industries exist to tweak serotonin, dopamine, and cortisol, chemicals these parasites already mastered in the wild. And we know certain brain-infecting microbes can subtly shift mammalian behavior too, so the line between fish brainwashing and human free will may be more blurred than anyone likes to admit. When you picture those killifish shimmering beneath the surface, waving their fins like they're auditioning for a spot-on so you think you can swim, you're looking at pure evolutionary absurdity and genius, a creature transformed into bait by another organism's reproductive calendar, a nervous system reprogrammed for sympathy and sacrifice. And what's most unsettling isn't how strange it is, but how natural. This is normal, ancient, and wildly successful biology at work. The ocean doesn't need monsters from legend. Its real-life horrors are microscopic and infinitely patient. So if a trematode can rewrite a fish's fate with a few molecular nudges, maybe it's not so unthinkable that something microscopic could nudge us too. After all, the ingredients are the same. Neurons, neurotransmitters, feedback loops. We just happen to narrate our side of the story in more complicated sentences. In a sense, every time a virus or parasite takes the controls, the ocean whispers a reminder that free will might just be another feature evolution hasn't debugged yet. The land connection, Toxoplasma Gondii, and us. Let's step onto land for a minute, not to escape the ocean's mind tricks, but to see how eerily familiar they look in our own backyards. Because if you think brain-hacking parasites are some aquatic oddity, meet Toxoplasma Gondii, the cat-loving, neuron-nesting, possibly decision-altering protozoan that makes the phrase crazy cat person sound less like a joke and more like a mild diagnosis. This single-celled intruder is everywhere. Roughly a third of humanity carries it, often without symptoms. You can pick it up from undercooked meat, contaminated water, or most famously from cat feces. Yes, the same adorable creature that knocks your coffee onto your laptop might also be quietly installing behavioral updates in your brain. It's almost poetic. Ancient Egyptians worshipped cats as gods. Modern humans host their divine microbes. Here's where things get unsettling. Toxoplasma doesn't just hang out in your system. It sets up long-term residence inside neurons. In rodents, the parasite's preferred test subjects, this infection flips survival instincts. Healthy mice respond to the scent of cat urine like it's a horror movie soundtrack. Infected ones treat that smell like perfume. They strut right into danger, effectively offering themselves up as dinner so the parasite can enter its final host, the feline gut. Once there, it reproduces its job complete. Evolution's version of mission accomplished. That might sound like an extreme case in rodents, but humans aren't exactly untouched by its psychological side effects. Numerous studies have linked toxoplasma exposure to subtle behavioral changes, increased risk-taking, slow reaction times, and in some cases, altered dominance and social tendencies. Drivers with latent infection, for instance, seem more likely to get into car accidents. Researchers suspect the parasite's manipulation of dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical, could be at play. On a microscopic level, toxoplasma might be adjusting our reward circuits just enough to make "why not?" feel more compelling than maybe wait. But that's only part of the mystery. Inside the brain, toxoplasma sets off a low-grade inflammatory response, the neurological equivalent of background static. It's subtle, nothing dramatic, just enough noise to change how neurons communicate. Over time, that can lead to tiny distortions in mood and cognition. Imagine your brain as an orchestra, and this parasite is the percussionist who keeps hitting the cymbals half a beat too late. No single mistake ruins the symphony, but after a while, you feel the rhythm shift. Now, scientists love caution. They emphasize that correlation isn't causation. Car crashes don't prove parasites are behind the wheel. Still, a 2025 meta-analysis of over 24,000 participants found a statistically significant connection between Toxoplasma infection and cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's disease. Researchers even discovered that a small cluster of infected neurons can disrupt communication across vast brain networks by altering how they release tiny information packets called extracellular vesicles. These vesicles normally carry chemical messages between neurons and astrocytes, but Toxoplasma's interference can ramp up glutamate levels, spark inflammation, and mess with memory processing. Basically, the parasite doesn't need to infect every cell, it just needs to jam the lines. The effect isn't uniform, though. Some studies reveal sex-dependent differences in how the infection influences mental health and even physical attraction patterns. It's almost as if the parasite fine-tunes its approach depending on hormonal chemistry, like a highly adaptable marketer tailoring ads for different demographics. Nature's version of targeted advertising. This personality type likes novelty, let's increase dopamine output by 10%. And while this all sounds vaguely catastrophic, most people with the infection never notice anything amiss. That's almost more terrifying. A parasite that can alter brain chemistry yet keep you functional is evolution's version of stealth technology. It doesn't destroy the host, it collaborates, nudging just enough to serve its agenda. The infection persists quietly for life, mostly contained by the immune system, generating microscopic drama that plays out over decades without a single symptom worth calling the doctor for. If this reminds you of our fishy friends back in the estuary, that's no coincidence. Toxoplasma and Euoplorchis operate on the same principle, change the host behavior to complete the life cycle. The settings differ. One triggers suicidal dance routines, the other tweaks risk perception. But the script remains, host does something stupid, parasite wins. From killifish glinting for gulls, to humans driving a little too boldly, it's one recurring evolutionary joke with infinite punchlines. Here's an even more ironic twist. Those marine parasites we talked about earlier, many of them are relatives of Toxoplasma. They belong to a broader group adept at sneaking into nervous systems and filling with neurotransmitters. It's not impossible that similar ocean-originated microorganisms interact with our physiology when we consume seafood or swim in contaminated water. The ocean's own behavioral tinkerers could easily hitch rides into our diets, our microbiomes, maybe even our neurons. We just haven't mapped all the routes yet. The scary part isn't confirmed control, it's potential access. Humans are porous ecosystems, not sealed fortresses. Marine RNA viruses and bacteria frequently exchange genes with terrestrial ones through aerosols, food chains, and water systems. Our bodies may be open-minded to a fault, sampling molecular gossip from the sea every day. So while Toxoplasma is the current poster child of parasitic mind influence, it could just be one of many participants in a planetary conversation happening at the cellular level. And yes, in case you're wondering, the irony is delicious. Humanity's tender relationship with cats, our purring household deities, is possibly orchestrated by the same kind of parasitic strategy that turned fish into suicidal swimmers. We coo over them, feed them, clean their litter boxes, and without realizing it, distribute their microbial emissaries around the world. Poseidon might have lost his trident, but clearly he found new agents. They just come with whiskers and an Instagram following. When you think about it, the mythic sea monsters never really vanished. They scaled down. The sirens singing sailors to their doom have become molecular murmurs rewriting behavior through neurotransmitters. The sea's influence on land didn't stop at the shoreline. It evolved clever ways to keep nudging terrestrial minds. That faint, irrational comfort you feel when your cat curls up next to you could be love, could be serotonin, could be a single-celled symbiont whispering mission accomplished. So as we pivot back toward the ocean, keep this thought handy. If a land-based microbe like Toxoplasma, Gondii can make mammals rethink fear, trust, and temptation. Imagine what an ocean containing 10 to the 30th viral entities might be whispering to every organism connected to its waters, including us. The manipulation doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be patient. After all, evolution's best tricks don't shout, They hum quietly under your thoughts, waiting for you to call them your own. The ocean's microbial messengers. Here's a fun thought experiment. What if Neptune's messengers weren't mythical dolphins or tridents of lightning, but invisible strands of RNA drifting through seawater? Because that's increasingly what science suggests. The ocean is full of microscopic couriers, viruses so small they outnumber every star we can see by a factor of millions, constantly delivering new genetic orders to whatever cell they find. They're not whispering poetry, they're issuing molecular memos that say, change how you live or die trying. Marine viruses aren't passive hitchhikers, they're remodelers. When one infects a bacterium or plankton cell, it doesn't simply take up residence, it reorganizes the host's entire metabolism. Some carry fragments of DNA stolen from their former hosts, ready to install them into the next. A landmark study found nearly 100 distinct RNA viruses in the ocean, lugging around modified copies of the exact genes their hosts use for carbon capture and photosynthesis. In plain English, they hijack the energy systems of Earth's smallest plants, turning them into temporary biofactories for viral reproduction. That manipulation goes deep. Scientists discovered that certain cyanophages, the viruses that infect photosynthetic bacteria, actually switch on alternate photosynthetic machinery. It's like breaking into someone's house, rearranging their furniture, and calling it feng shui. The purpose isn't aesthetic. It's to keep the host cell producing energy longer so the virus can multiply before the host disintegrates. Once the lysis occurs, scientific code for viral kaboom, organic debris floods the surrounding water, feeding a new generation of microbes. The domino effect runs from chemistry to climate. These minute demolitions help regulate how much carbon the ocean releases or buries each day. This feedback is so enormous that researchers call it the viral shunt. Roughly a fifth of all marine bacteria die daily because of infection, releasing around 3 gigatons of carbon annually. To put that in perspective, every day bacterial ghosts are feeding unseen armies that ultimately determine the planet's carbon budget. If viruses are invisible messengers, they're also accountants, balancing planetary books nobody ever agreed to keep. But what about the behavior part? For single-celled organisms, chemistry is behavior. A virus can alter how microbial host swims when it divides or what compounds it releases. Some infections tweak surface proteins, making microbes stick together in clumps, which affects how they float or sink. A kind of microbial choreography that decides whether carbon drifts to deep ocean storage or returns to the atmosphere. You could say these viruses orchestrate the world's slowest, widest flash mob. Plankton twirl, sediment settle, climate follows. The psychological version of all this, if you stretch metaphor just slightly, is equally eerie: metabolic mind control at a planetary scale. Human brains use neurotransmitters to modulate mood. Microbial cells use metabolic genes to regulate productivity. Both systems rely on distributed communication and feedback. And while your serotonin levels decide whether you feel generous or grumpy, planktonic chemistry decides whether storms form or seasons shift. The symmetry is unnerving. The ocean's microbes run the emotional climate of the planet, while ours run the emotional climate of ourselves. Some of those regulatory genes are the same ancient templates. Now trace that backward. Every time we breathe in sea spray, eat fish, or swim, we're not just touching the ocean. We're inviting bits of that microbial circuitry into our biological network. Studies show that marine microorganisms routinely hitch rides into the atmosphere as aerosols, blowing inland where we inhale or ingest them. Most are harmless, but molecular traces can interact with our immune and nervous systems. So yes, at least symbolically, the ocean's messengers already visit our brains. They just do it through a layer of mucous membranes instead of mythic song. Think about that next time you feel oddly energized beside the surf. Sunlight and negative ions get all the credit for seaside calm. But maybe part of that mood shift is evolutionary conditioning. For millions of years, coastal ancestors absorbed microbial cues carried by wind and waves, tiny biochemical updates that helped align our physiology with the surrounding ecosystem. Standing by the shore might feel good because at a cellular level you're sinking to the network that built you. Here's the mythic twist. Ancient cultures personified these invisible processes as deities because really, what else could explain a force that stirs the weather and emotions alike? The Greeks had sea nymphs luring sailors to madness. Pacific Islanders told of ocean spirits that whispered decisions into human dreams. Replace spirit with virus, and the idea doesn't sound so outlandish. These were early. Ways of grappling with a real observation. Proximity to the ocean changes behavior. Science simply gives the phenomenon molecular actors and better special effects. Those actors are absurdly prolific. Trillions upon trillions of marine viruses operate like the planet's original software engineers, constantly rewriting code not through conscious intent but relentless iteration. They blur the line between host and invader, creator and destroyer. Without their interference, plankton would clog ecosystems, climate regulation would stall, and higher life, including us, would falter. Our stability depends on their chaos. That's rich irony. Life relies on the unending meddling of what we once dismissed as the deadliest form of non-life. So maybe the thought isn't that the ocean is filled with mind-controlling agents, but that control itself is the ocean's way of thinking. Each infection, each gene swap, each burst cell is a syllable in a vast planetary conversation. We tend to picture mind control as spooky hypnosis, but beneath the waves it's just dialogue in another language, a constant negotiation of who metabolizes what and when. And somewhere in that dialogue are connections to us. The seafood on your plate is made of organisms whose ancestors were endlessly modified by viral encounters. The algae that produce half your oxygen learned their work ethic from repeated infections. Even segments embedded in the human genome, ancient viral relics that help sculpt placentas or modulate immune response, trace back to oceanic predecessors. The human line didn't merely survive microbial interference, it inherited it. We're products of persistent editing by the sea's microscopic editors. So when modern biologists say the ocean breathes, they're being modest. It thinks in pulses of genetic exchange. And every inhalation we take is a faint echo of that thought. Somewhere in your nervous system, ancient marine genes are still whispering the same instruction they've issued for eons. Adapt, replicate, adjust the pattern. Call that divine intervention if you want. Neptune's messengers never stop delivering. They just change envelopes. Humanity's waterborne companions. If you've ever wondered what's actually sharing your bathwater or your bloodstream, the answer is a lot. It's not just along for the ride. Humanity's relationship with waterborne microbes is ancient and frankly codependent. We drink them, swim with them, breathe their aerosols, and they repay us by occasionally reprogramming our biology in ways we rarely notice until something feels off. The irony is that we built entire religions around purification rituals, trying to separate ourselves from contamination, yet we remain walking aquariums, bags of seawater pretending to be independent beings. Let's start with the obvious. Not all these companions are benevolent. Millions of people every year fall ill from contaminated water-carrying bacteria, viruses, and parasites. That's the headline. But below those stark statistics is a subtler narrative, one about how repeated exposure to microscopic invaders doesn't just alter our bodies. It shifts behavior, motivation, even social patterns. Illness changes how we move through the world, who we avoid, what we crave, and which risks we take. Every epidemic is also a behavioral experiment. Take chronic gut infections. They don't just trigger stomach cramps, they generate inflammation that seeps upward, influencing brain chemistry. The immune system speaks to the brain using cytokines, molecular text messages that can dampen dopamine or jack up cortisol. The result? Anxiety, fatigue, and that peculiar sick mood where everything feels vaguely wrong. In a way, microbes achieve two goals simultaneously: survival inside a host and manipulation of the host behavior to minimize exposure. You stay in bed, rest, and drink fluids exactly what the infection wants. That's evolutionary marketing at the molecular level. Now consider the aquatic angle. Waterborne pathogens such as norovirus, Vibrio, and Giardia spread through oceans, rivers, or even mist. Most cause acute physical symptoms, but scientists are starting to notice post-infection effects that echo the neurological footprints of parasites like Toxoplasma. Inflammation acting on the vagus nerve, the main communication highway between gut and brain, can lead to lingering mood changes, brain fog, or disrupted appetite. The euphemism low energy after a stomach bug might actually mean your gut microbes temporarily rewired the thermostat that regulates motivation. That's the indirect influence. The direct ones are stranger. Some studies show that repeated exposure to certain environmental microbes, especially from natural waters, can influence serotonin production through interactions with immune cells and gut bacteria. Essentially, we co-opt fragments of microbial metabolism to generate calm. Microbes release compounds that our bodies use as signaling molecules. We experience those signals as emotion. It's an evolutionary collaboration disguised as self-care. The phrase water has a soothing affect might be less poetic metaphor and more neurochemical truth. But not everyone enjoys the same dialogue with their microbial roommates. In regions where water purification is unreliable, chronic infection shapes entire communities' behavior. When disease risk rises, social patterns adapt. People change how they gather, migrate, and even whom they trust. Over generations, those behavioral adjustments become culture. Fear of tainted sources influences ritual, architecture, and diet. Ironically, the microbes responsible for that fear persist, quietly guiding social evolution from the shallows. You could argue that pathogens built civilizations plumbing through negative reinforcement. Zoom in again and you'll find microbe-driven changes in cognition, particularly in children repeatedly exposed to unsafe water. Malnutrition and inflammation from chronic diarrheal illness impair nutrient absorption critical for brain development. Decades later, those biochemical ripples show up as differences in learning, risk aversion, and stress response. The microbes never write philosophy, but they do edit the philosophers. The boundary between biological and cultural evolution blurs when entire populations adapt to microbial pressure as though training under invisible coaches. From another angle, this relationship borders on symbiosis. Some aquatic bacteria found in coastal environments appear to train the human immune system, reducing allergies and autoimmune issues. A little microbial exposure keeps defenses flexible, a natural vaccination strategy. The old advice to let kids play in the mud might also translate to let them interface with the planet's microbial operating system. If parasites are hackers, then commensal bacteria are system updates, sometimes annoying, occasionally life-saving, always running in the background. Here's the ironic twist. Humanity's behavioral link to water isn't just biological, it's emotional. Studies repeatedly show that proximity to blue spaces improves mood and creativity. We attribute that to beauty or relaxation, but maybe the mechanism is molecular familiarity. Our bodies recognize the chemical cues carried on sea air. In micro doses, marine aerosols deliver fragments of bacterial cell walls that stimulate serotonin-related immune receptors. Translation: standing by the ocean may cause a literal chemical sigh of relief. Poseidon turned out to be a microbiologist with good bedside manner. Of course, every benefit comes with a caution. Rising ocean temperatures are expanding the ranges of pathogens once confined to warm zones. Vibrio bacteria, for instance, now pop up in northern waters where seafood lovers least expect them. These fluctuations don't just threaten physical health, they can also shift patterns of human migration, labor, and consumption. Replace epidemic with ecosystem feedback, and you glimpse how microbes tug at the strings of economics and emotion alike. Our global supply chains may be superficially financial, but biologically, they're feedback systems built on microbial contingencies. Even if none of these waterborne organisms ever directly hacks a human neuron, they certainly hack context. They change availability of food, shape immunological tone, and through that influence population-level temperament. Picture a society suddenly more anxious during drought or calmer along coasts where benign exposures tune stress responses. Taken globally, humanity's collective chemistry mirrors its hydrology. Moods swell and recede like tides. When ancient priests claimed the sea mirrored the gods' emotions, maybe they just noticed what epidemiologists quantify now. Water quality predicts collective behavior. And just when you think this couldn't get more absurd, remember that our microbiome itself has aquatic ancestry. The gut's viral inhabitants, the so-called phagiome, evolved from marine viruses. Some still share genetic elements with oceanic relatives that regulate metabolism and immune signaling. Every sip of unfiltered water is basically a networking event for distant cousins. When we say water connects all of life, it's almost literal. It's the medium through which microbial instructions travel, looping from plankton to people and back again. So maybe we're not distinct from the sea's mind hackers, but extensions of them. The same logic that pushes a killifish toward a heron or a plankton cell toward the light manifests in us as thirst, curiosity, or nostalgia for beaches we've never seen. The mechanisms differ: neurochemical, hormonal, cultural, but the script's handwriting is unmistakably aquatic. The ocean doesn't need to seize your brain outright. It just has to remind you where it came from. That's why every time we purify water, disinfect surfaces, and wage our endless war against germs, we're really resisting reunion with the larger network affair. Build our cognition. Yet complete separation remains impossible and perhaps undesirable. Those invisible companions shape immunity, emotion, and the quiet pulse of collective behavior. We fear them because they remind us that free will might simply be the tidy edge of a much older design, the sea teaching its descendants how to think. Myth, mind, and marine control. Before science had microscopes or Latin names for parasites, people explained the ocean's strange pull through stories. Sailors spoke of sirens who sang them off course, sea witches who clouded judgment, gods whose tantrums could whip peaceful water into chaos. These weren't just cautionary myths about navigation. They were early ways of describing something everyone felt but couldn't measure. The sea gets inside your head. Spend enough time near it and your mood shift, your choices bend. Turns out mythology might have been the first draft of neurobiology, because when you look at how parasites and viruses hijack behavior, the line between legend and lab study gets blurry fast. Ancient Greeks said Poseidon ruled both sea and emotion. Modern researchers say marine microbes modify neurotransmitters and alter stress responses. Different vocabulary, same premise, invisible forces stirring feelings and steering destinies. The ocean has always been a mirror for our subconscious, but what if some of those reflections were feedback from the microbes that built us? Consider how myths always gave the ocean personality. Sometimes nurturing, sometimes furious, always unpredictable. That unpredictability is precisely what happens on a microbial level. Viral populations rise and fall with temperature, salinity, and light cycles, sending ripple effects through the food web that influence everything up the chain. Fish migrations, coral blooms, human fishing patterns. Behavior at every scale becomes synchronized to the sea's microscopic mood swings. We used to call that divine temperament. Now we call it ecosystem dynamics. Either way, the message is the ocean sets the rhythm, and the rest of us dance. And speaking of dancing, humanity's fascination with sea madness might have roots in very real biology. Historians describe sailors after months at sea acting giddy, paranoid, euphoric, sometimes all in one day. While fatigue and malnutrition explain some of that, exposure to marine aerosols teeming with biological particles offers another angle. Breathe enough of those, and your immune and endocrine systems start a conversation with the ocean's chemistry. The resulting hormonal cocktail can tilt emotions. That old phrase about the sea driving people wild might not have been pure metaphor, more like early documentation of biochemical mood modulation. Every mythic creature has its modern analog. Sirens luring men with song. Try neuroactive compounds produced by plankton that influence shellfish behavior, and, when concentrated through seafood, occasionally human perception. Sea witches cursing sailors with madness? Maybe a toxic algal bloom laced with compounds that scramble neural signaling. Poseidon's wrath turning calm sees violent. Swap the trident for a viral bloom altering surface tension and climate feedback, whipping up literal storms. Myth was our first attempt at connecting the dots between unseen causality and felt experience. What's beautiful and absurd is how myth and microbiology use the same dramatic tropes. Both describe possession, transformation, surrender. The fungus that turns an ant into a climber echoes the nymph compelling sailors to leap into waves. The trematode scripting a fish's death dance performs the same function as a curse compelling tragic fate. It's theater written in chemicals instead of words. We're still characters in it. We've just upgraded the audience seating. And maybe that's why we find marine metaphors irresistible when talking about emotion. Waves of grief, undercurrents of desire, storms of thought. Our language portrays the ancient hunch that mental states and ocean states are variations of one process. Neuroscience backs the poetry. Electrical oscillations in the brain mirror fluid dynamics equations describing tides. The same mathematics of turbulence governs both waves on the sea and bursts of neural firing during emotion. When poets said our minds are like the ocean, they weren't exaggerating. They just didn't realize physics agreed. Still, it's funny how we insist on separating myth from science, emotion from environment, as though labeling things makes us immune to them. Meanwhile, microscopic narratives unfold under every crest. Each viral bloom manipulating its host mirrors the way belief systems once manipulated behavior. The parallel is uncanny. Invisible agents guiding masses, promising order through chaos. The difference is intention. Parasites don't preach ideology, they simply replicate. Culture adds morality to the mechanism nature runs on autopilot. Picture an ancient sailor staring at phosphorescent waves, glowing blue in the dark. To him, that shimmer felt supernatural, a sign of gods awake beneath the surface. Today, we know it's bioluminescent plankton triggered by motion, tiny organisms releasing chemical light when disturbed. Yet step onto a night beach now, kick the sand, watch it sparkle, and tell me your brain doesn't spark the same ancient awe. Knowledge doesn't erase enchantment, it relocates it to the cellular level. Science didn't kill Poseidon, he revealed his operating system. And maybe that's the hidden joke evolution's been telling all along. The myths we spun about marine control were never wrong, just miscast. The ocean really does influence minds, just through microbiota rather than melodrama. It doesn't roar commands, it murmurs adjustments. Those shifts in mood near the coast, the creative bursts from sea air, their chemical messaging carried on salt and mist. Neptune whispering through aerosolized cytokines sounds ridiculous until you remember your body listens to everything via molecule, including the breeze. So in a sense, we've come full circle. Where ancient cultures offered sacrifices to appease the sea's moods, modern humanity offers samples, sequencing genetic libraries to decode the same mystery. Both acts stem from respect and mild terror toward forces that decide our fate without consulting us. The only real difference is wardrobe, lab coats instead of robes. If myth was the emotional translation of microbial influence, then current science is its literal translation. Both tell us that control is never singular, agency never absolute. Whether you call it a God's war or viral symbiosis, the outcome's the same. Behavior shaped by something vast, invisible, and wet. And the punchline, as always, belongs to irony. The more we uncover the mechanisms behind mind control, the more they resemble the metaphors we dismissed as superstition. Turns out the sea's whispers were real. We just misheard them through centuries of metaphor. So when the myth finally fades and only the biology remains, what's left is somehow stranger. Not Poseidon swinging storms out of spite, but microscopic puppeteers steering evolution cell by cell. The gods retire, the microbes clock in, and humanity keeps dancing to the same molecular music. Because deep down, myth or molecule, it's still the ocean pulling the strings, and we forever enthralled keep mistaking the rhythm for free will. The neurochemistry of marine hijacking. So far, we've indulged in myth, poetry, and a healthy dose of absurdism, but now it's time to peek under the hood to see what the biochemical puppeteers are actually doing when they hijack nervous systems. Everything comes down to a few molecules that trick neurons into misfiring, rewire communication lines, or throw emotional thermostats out of balance. The real madness of the sea isn't screams from the deep, it's whispers between neurotransmitters. Let's start with neurotransmitter disruption, the favorite power tool of parasites everywhere. Take serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate, the brain's holy trinity for mood, motivation, and communication. When Euoplochus californiensis infected that unfortunate killifish, it didn't need a specialized organ. It simply tweaked serotonin distribution in the brain. Less serotonin means muted anxiety, less fear, more swagger. The fish becomes a marine equivalent of a thrill-seeking influencer. Reckless confidence, glittery moves, no survival instinct. The single chemical adjustment collapses an entire behavioral repertoire honed by evolution. One molecule swap, one life script rewritten. Humans live by the same circuitry. That's what makes the story so eerie. The same chemical recipes that make a fish fearless or a rat affectionate toward cats scent also govern our own impulses. Parasites don't invent new languages. They speak ours with unsettling fluency. Toxoplasma gondii provenly tampers with dopamine signaling in mammalian brains. Dopamine drives reward perception, turning curiosity into risk and desire into compulsion. Whether it's a mouse sniffing danger or a human reaching for an extra drink, both follow biochemical nudges that feel intimately personal. The parasite simply adjusts a dimmer switch. Then there's the deeper layer, cellular communication. Modern neuroscience has uncovered that neurons chat through microscopic packages called extracellular vesicles. Think of them as courier drones carrying messages between nerve cells and support cells called astrocytes. Under normal conditions, these vesicles maintain balance, adjusting glutamate levels, preventing inflammation, keeping conversation polite. But introduce an invader, a parasite or virus skilled at molecular sabotage, and the signal degenerates into chaos. Infected neurons release fewer vesicles or corrupted ones, distorting messaging across the network. One local infection can send ripples of bad information through entire brain regions. No dark magic necessary, just cellular gossip gone toxic. Researchers watched this happen in brains infected with Toxoplasma. Altered vesicle flow sparked overproduction of glutamate, leading to excitotoxicity, many seizures, and long-term changes in behavior. The same biochemical storm could in principle be triggered by other pathogens adapting similar strategies. If land-based microbes can master that trick, marine viruses with billions of evolutionary trials surely have prototypes cooking beneath the waves. RNA viruses already carry host genes they've stolen during infections. Some regulate metabolic functions that overlap with neural signaling pathways. Translate that into human terms, and you have potential crosstalk between oceanic gene fragments and our neurochemistry, not direct possession but faint modulation. The next culprit is chronic neuroinflammation, slow-motion sabotage. When foreign molecules infiltrate the body, microglia, the brain's immune cells light up like border guards. They release cytokines, tiny chemical alarms to fight the invasion. Short-term, that's protective. Long-term, it's like living next to a smoke alarm that won't shut up. Constant activation changes how neurons fire, dampening motivation, sleep, and cognition. Studies already link chronic inflammation to depression, anxiety, even altered social bonding. Now imagine exposure to marine microbes through aerosolized sea spray, seafood, or contaminated water that provokes subtle immune tweaks every time we interact with the coast. The chemical echoes might integrate into our mood patterns, tiny tides rising and falling in sync with environmental microbes. Poseidon doesn't need to roar when he can modulate cytokine levels. But here's where it gets truly fascinating and uncomfortably poetic. Many ocean viruses use the same signaling pathways humans rely on to maintain homeostasis. Cyanophages, for instance, manipulate the photosynthetic genes of cyanobacteria to prolong energy output. At a molecular level, that's like tweaking dopamine to extend motivation. Different scale, same idea. Coax the host to keep performing until the parasite's goals are met. The ocean perfected motivational hacking before mammals even existed. We simply inherited the trick, dressed it in psychology, and called it a work ethic. And evolution didn't stop there. Viral genes, embedded in animal genomes, remnants of ancient infections, occasionally reawaken, influencing development and immunity. Some even assist in forming placentas and regulating brain signaling. Humans carry hundreds of these molecular fossils, many derived from marine ancestors. In a backhanded way, infection sculpted cognition itself. The ocean's earliest neurological edits became templates for consciousness. Every manic burst of creativity, every instinctive fear might owe a microscopic debt to those primordial controllers. It's like realizing your operating system was originally written by algae consultants. Skeptics reasonably ask for proof of direct marine influence on modern human brains. Fair. We can't yet point to a specific virus whispering commands from seawater, but we can chart credible routes. Aerosolized microbes entering sinuses, gut-brain interactions from dietary exposure, gene transfers detectable in human gut phages closely related to marine equivalents. Even without active infection, fragments of viral RNA or proteins can trigger immune neural cascades. You don't need a brain-eating parasite, just a biological suggestion slipped through the back door. Behavior rarely results from one signal, it's a symphony. If enough oceanic notes reach our internal orchestra, the melody shifts. Irony thrives here. Humanity prides itself on designing mind-control technologies, advertising algorithms, neural implants, psychoactive drugs, yet nature's been beta testing subtler versions since the Precambrian. Parasites learned to edit motivation before we discovered motivation as a concept. Viruses rewired cellular communication before we coined neuroscience. The blueprint for manipulation is as old as metabolism. We've merely rebranded it as innovation. Picture it like this. A fish swims under chemical persuasion. A human scrolls a timeline under dopamine persuasion. Both feel autonomous. Both follow invisible biochemical strings. The difference is only who's holding the spool. A trematode's life cycle, an app developer's engagement metric, each exploits the same neural vulnerabilities. It's cosmic comedy delivered by molecules. So when we talk about marine hijacking, we're really describing nature's prototype for influence, a molecular conversation that begins in the sea and reverberates through everything living. Every neuron firing in your skull uses ions that once drifted through ancient salt water. Every emotional surge echoes chemical rhythms first tuned by plankton. Life didn't merely arise from the ocean, it continues to think in its dialect. In that sense, the boundary between human thought and ocean chemistry dissolves at the molecular level. The next time you feel inexplicably drawn to the sound of waves, it might not be nostalgia, it might be feedback. Maybe your neurons recognize their source code echoing across time, a subtle reminder that free will isn't freedom from nature, but participation in its longest conversation. The sea still speaks through ions, neurotransmitters, and the faint electric pulse we call a thought. We just learned to hear it in language instead of current. Evolution's hidden hand. Evolution has many publicists, genes, mutations, survival, but its quietest agent might be infection. At first, that sounds backwards. We think of viruses and parasites as mistakes, side quests of nature gone wrong. Yet the record in our DNA tells a different story. Microbial meddling didn't just shape how species behave, it sculpted what thinking itself could be. If behavioral manipulation is a strategy, then evolution has been running a long con built on it, rewriting instincts in return for continuity. The puppeteer and evolution's hand are often the same glove. Let's rewind a few billion years when single cells ruled and curiosity hadn't yet grown neurons. Viruses existed even then, ferrying spare genetic parts between hosts. Those fragments weren't all destructive. Some got stitched into host genomes, granted new metabolic tricks, and became permanent residents. Over eons, these embedded invaders formed a library of emergency tools, switches for immunity, reproduction, and communication. In humans, nearly 8% of our DNA is viral in origin. That's more real estate than the sequence that codes for actual working proteins. The genome reads less like a family tree and more like an open-source software repository, patched repeatedly by infections that refuse to leave quietly. What evolved from that messy collaboration isn't just anatomy, it's behavior. When a parasite manipulates a host into braver or quieter actions, natural selection notices. If the tweak helps survival, the host species may bake that pattern into genetics long after the original infection fades. Fear circuits, memory triggers, attraction cues, all may have begun as parasite side effects that proved too useful to discard. A killifish fatal dance is tragedy in the moment, but zoom out and it's behavioral experimentation. Financed by parasites. The ones that survive develop better stress filters. Over generations, that can become a new temperament altogether. Humans aren't exempt. Our ancestors spent millions of years drinking from rivers, eating raw seafood, cohabiting with every microbe the planet could throw at them. Each infection that didn't kill added data to the behavioral archive, genes for immune tolerance, sensory vigilance, or group cooperation. Ancient viral insertions even helped form the placenta, turning pregnancy into a semi-controlled invasion. Without a virus, mammals might never develop live birth. In that sense, life itself is parasitic plagiarism gone right. That's the comic masterpiece of evolution's hidden hand. Manipulation becomes synergy. Consider how some species evolved to exploit their parasite's influence instead of fighting it. Certain shrimp display brighter colors only when infected by specific microbes, colors that attract mates faster. What began as mind control turned into marketing. The parasite ensured its transmission. The host gained romantic appeal. Nature looked at coercion and said, two can play that game. The same feedback could underpin broader patterns, like human social bonding via immune system genes, originally shaped by viral battles. Even empathy might be an immunological byproduct. Our cells learning to tolerate difference because ancient viruses taught them to negotiate. Of course, evolution doesn't write manifestos, it compiles workarounds. A virus inserts a selfish gene, the host co-opts it. A parasite alters neurochemistry, offspring internalize the switch as normal. Over geological time, constant biological blackmail builds complexity. Intelligence may have arisen not from pure adaptiveness, but from parasites insisting on neuroplasticity. To keep resisting manipulation, hosts needed better prediction, memory, self-monitoring, the cognitive toolkit we now equate with consciousness. So awareness itself could be the scar tissue of endless microbial persuasion attempts. That interpretation reframes free will as evolutionary détente. You act independently only because your ancestors spent eons developing defense systems against being acted through. The limbic system, the seat of motivation and fear, exists partly to filter chemical noise from invaders. Each emotion, from joy to dread, may trace lineage to some microbial assault that demanded compartmentalization of signal and self. In chasing immunity, life stumbled into individuality. Still, irony reigns. Many of the viral genes our immunity depends on also regulate mood and cognition. The same molecular motifs that once let a parasite manipulate stress hormones now let us compose concertos or panic before deadlines. Creativity, anxiety, altruism, they're all chemical negotiations in a body built by compromise. Evolution didn't engineer perfection. It repurposed side effects until they produced art. There's an almost mythic symmetry here. In legends, gods often punish humans with madness that later yields enlightenment. Biologically, infections have played that same dual role, chaos leading to adaptation. The pathogen that muddled brain chemistry in one generation might, a few million years later, manifest as heightened memory consolidation or pattern recognition. Poseidon's trident strikes, fury follows, then calm, and from that turbulence a more resilient mind emerges. Myth was metaphoric shorthand for an evolutionary reality we're only now deciphering with genomics. Even cooperative behaviors could be seen as truce signals in this arms race. Enormous populations of gut bacteria communicate through quorum sensing, chemical polling that decides when to act. Human societies mirror the mechanism through language and culture. We externalize microbial coordination, scaling it into civilization. Our collective intelligence may literally be herd immunity expressed cognitively. And what about emotions variability, the way moods ebb and flow like tides? Those oscillations originate in feedback between hormones, immune responses, and neurotransmitters, all systems refined by constant microbial negotiation. The ocean inside metaphor isn't fluff, it's accurate biochemistry. Every surge of happiness or despair is a miniature replay of early life adapting to chemical invasion. Evolution left the settings flexible because rigidity dies quickly. Fluid minds thrive, stagnant ones fossilize. When scientists map animal genomes, they keep finding viral relics coaxed into regulatory roles, fossilized manipulations still running the show. One endogenous retrovirus assists with forming the amygdala's stress circuitry, others participate in building neurons. Our behavioral diversity might depend on which ancient infections activated or silenced in development. Personality, that cherished illusion of uniqueness, could be a performance directed by dormant microbes deciding which parental gene to emphasize. It's less I think, therefore I am, and more we negotiated, therefore I function. If that sounds bleak, it shouldn't. It's strangely democratic. Evolution doesn't privilege purity, it rewards dialogue. Every species, parasite included, becomes a sentence in the planet's ongoing experiment about cooperation through coercion. The ocean's viruses started the conversation. Terrestrial life just added lyrics. We're not victims of manipulation, but moderators of it, keeping the frequency alive. So next time someone says humans transcended nature, remember the truth is funnier. We're nature's best inside joke, thinking organisms built from countless attempts at mind control. Each thought you have is evolution quoting an ancient parasite with attribution lost to time. Free will? Maybe. But it's built atop layers of microbial persuasion so old they become instinct. In the grand evolutionary script, consciousness is just the latest improv by actors who refuse to leave the stage. The modern microbial relationship. Picture your body as a private island that's never really private. Every inch, from skin to gut, teems with microscopic residents holding family reunions you didn't authorize. The funny part? Many of them trace their lineage straight to the ocean. Our very biology is a tidepool, a continuation of marine ecosystems folded inward. Scientists like to call it the microbiome. Poets could call it the ocean practicing reincarnation. Either way, your sense of self might just be specialized seawater with delusions of grandeur. Inside this inner ocean, bacterial empires rise and fall hourly, negotiating territory with viral supervisors called bacteriophages. These phages aren't villains so much as performance coaches, refining bacterial productivity through strategic purges. The relationship is exactly as dysfunctional as it sounds, yet astonishingly effective. The gut's microbial battles regulate digestion, immunity, even mood. When certain bacterial groups flourish, Neurotransmitter production shifts, serotonin rises or falls. You feel calm or restless. Poseidon's trident, reincarnated as microbial quorum sensing, still decides storms. But now the weather unfolds in your abdomen. Here's where the absurdity peaks. Those ancient marine phages still pop up in human samples. Genomic comparisons reveal shared sequences between viruses from seawater and those inside our intestines. It's as if old ocean software updates continue patching our systems. Every sushi roll, every deep breath of coastal air invites new beta versions of microbial code into our network. Far from contamination, that exchange keeps the program running. The ocean doesn't merely surround us, it continually uploads itself through food chains, aerosols, cross-species gene flow. We like to draw lines between environments, land, sea, organism, but microbes treat these as suggestions. They ride wind and water, colonizing everything damp enough to sustain chemical chit-chat. The same viral strains infecting plankton have cousins in freshwater lakes, soils, sometimes even the human lung. So when you exhale near the coast, part of that mist isn't atmosphere leaving you, it's communication returning home. Called biological Wi-Fi. The coverage is excellent, though privacy policies are non-existent. Psychologists note the consistent link between time near the ocean and improved mental health. They talk about negative ions, scenic beauty, relaxation. That's fine, but here's another theory. Maybe seaside peace is biochemical nostalgia. Standing by saltwater, your microbiome meets familiar relatives it hasn't hosted since childbirth. Sea aerosols carry microbial fragments and metabolites that interact with nasal and gut receptors, nudging immune tolerance and serotonin signaling. You inhale, microbes whisper home, and cortisol steps aside. The ocean breeze effect might literally be microbial diplomacy, ancestral lineages reuniting across molecules. Yet our relationship with these communities is not purely romantic. Modern hygiene and antibiotics have waged centuries of war against them. We bleach our environment, scrub our skin, chlorinate our water, acts of rebellion against our wet origins. But total disinfection is illusion. Even the cleanest sterile room contains bacterial ghosts, and your body hurriedly reseeds them with each meal. When we suddenly experience sterile living, think space stations or long hospital stays, mental health often dips. Perhaps because our internal ocean hates stillness, it was designed for flow. Deprive it of microbial dialogue and the nervous system sulks. That uneasy codependence shapes culture itself. Societies with abundant microbial exposure, farmers, fishers, islanders, tend to display lower allergy rates and intriguingly more communal social behaviors. It's speculation but plausible. A richer microbiome fosters flexibility in the immune system, and that adaptability might echo psychologically as openness. By contrast, hypersterile urban lives narrow microbial. Diversity and statistically correlate with higher anxiety. The metaphor writes itself. Cut contact with the ocean's microscopic cousins, and even your personality dries out. Climate change complicates this story. As warming seas shift microbial distributions, new strains meet human systems unprepared for them. Vibrio bacteria creeping northward bring not just infections, but new antigens tweaking immune sensitivity. Fluctuations ripple through society as public fear, altered travel habits, reorganized economies. Those are behavioral ripples of microbiological origin, the planet's smallest citizens rewriting human patterns without a conscious plot. We read about climate anxiety, but maybe the term is literal. Global mood disorder transmitted through changing microbial cocktails in air and water. Meanwhile, medical research is rediscovering the symbiosis we almost sterilized away. Fecal microbiota transplants, yes, exactly what they sound like, are curing persistent diseases once thought intractable. That's the ocean's logic manifest. Fight infection with community. Replace scorched earth medicine with ecological restoration. The better we mimic marine balance, predator, prey, virus, host, the healthier humans become. Evolution applauds irony. We cure modern illness by reviving ancient coexistence. So where does mind control fit into this modern alliance? Look to the gut-brain axis, our internal telegraph cable. Neural fibers of the vagus nerve transmit microbial status reports directly to emotional centers. Certain bacterial metabolites trigger receptors influencing mood regulation. Experiments show probiotics can reduce depressive symptoms, a marketing dream framed as happy bacteria. Strip away the branding and it's the same old story. Microscopic influences steering macroscopic behavior. The sea simply outsourced part of its control network to our enteric nervous system, installed remotely via symbiosis. Even our cravings echo aquatic memory. Salt appetite, for instance, keeps body chemistry near the concentration of primordial seawater. When stress dehydrates cells, taste neurons amplify desire for that marine signature. You feel emotional and head for chips. The microbiome cheers for equilibrium. It's not addiction, it's homeostasis disguised as comfort food. Poseidon apparently runs a snack bar. The deeper you trace these connections, the harder it becomes to define human without including the microbial chorus. We are communities curated by evolution's oldest medium, water. Every thought, serotonin surge, or immune response is conditioned by participants that once floated freely in ancient tides. They never left, they just learned brand management. That quick mood lift after swimming, the creativity you feel under sea spray. It's not just psychology. It's a collaborative chemical exercise, your neurons syncing rhythm with planktonic descendants still practicing symbiosis on a planetary scale. So maybe we should stop talking about microbes invading us and start admitting we're extensions of them. The human body is the ocean's latest franchise. Mobile, semi-autonomous, but unmistakably on brand. Our actions, from city building to storytelling, are expressions of collective microbial ambitions refined through time. We sanitize surfaces, but we can't disinfect identity. Even in the age of technology, each heartbeat echoes wave patterns coded billions of years ago. That's the punchline. Independence is the grandest myth of all. The ocean never released us, it delegated. We are its continuation on land, carrying the chemistry of tides and arteries instead of currents. When we study marine mind control, we're really peering into a mirror. The reflection grins and says, "Still one of ours." And somewhere inside, at a cellular level, a billion ancient microbes nod approvingly. Mission ongoing. The slow-motion revelation. So here we are, the point where myth, molecule, and irony all meet for coffee. We've watched parasites choreograph fish into death dances, microbes tweak brains into risk-takers, and viruses rearrange planetary metabolism like cosmic accountants. Now comes the big question that's been humming underneath every wave of this story. How much of what we call us is actually ours? Let's be honest, nobody wants to hear that their sense of self might be an open-source project. But the evidence stacks higher than a tide chart. From the DNA stitched into our cells by ancient viruses to the bacteria whispering instructions through the gut-brain highway, the same patterns of manipulation that animate fish and insects still sculpt the subtler rhythms of human thought. Control doesn't vanish with intelligence, it just gets better at disguise. Think of behavior as a tide. Tides aren't conscious, they're the predictable result of overlapping pulls. Gravity's math, not emotion, makes them rise and fall. Replace gravity with microbial influence, and the metaphor holds unnervingly well. Our moods, cravings, and even moral certainties may all be products of countless gentle tugs, chemical moons orbiting the mind's ocean. We perceive stability because the fluctuations are synchronized, but zoom in and you'll find a whole system of waves beneath the surface, colliding, merging, receding. That realization shouldn't scare so much as humble. The grand myth of individuality doesn't disintegrate, it evolves. We remain storytellers, just co-author ones. Every human insight is a duet with biology's oldest instructions. When poets say inspiration feels like something flowing through them, they might be technically correct. It's the ancient marine circuitry lighting up, reciting an ancestral rhythm. Adapt, respond, imagine. Here's the kicker. This entire mind control phenomenon isn't malicious. It's ecosystem conversation. Parasites, hosts, and minds participate in negotiation, not domination. Euoplorchis convinces a fish to sparkle because that cooperation sustains its life cycle. Toxoplasma nudges a mammal toward risk because it fits into a pattern of transfer. Even our own immune systems learn temperance, not terror, from microbial contact. What looks like possession is really symphony, discordant sometimes, but rarely one-sided. The myth of Poseidon raging at sailors misses the quieter truth. His trident was never wrath, it was rhythm. So when you feel the sea tug at something primal, that call of the ocean, it may be more literal than sentimental. Your neurons are salient echoes of ancient coastlines. The concentration of salt in your blood almost exactly matches that of primordial seawater. You didn't just evolve near the ocean, you evolved from it, dragging pieces of its chemical logic along for the ride. Somewhere inside, a molecular nostalgia persists, pulling you toward waves not for recreation but for reconnection. The sea isn't out there, it's repeating within you. Let's fold the myth back in, because myth still explains what data struggles to, meaning. Poseidon's fury mirrored our neurological storms. Sirens dramatized the seductive pull of instinct over intellect. Those tales translated biochemistry into allegory long before lab equipment existed. The best part is that science now loops back to confirm the poetry. Where Greeks heard divine whispers, we detect cytokines trading memos with serotonergic neurons. Language changed, the story didn't. Humanity has always been fluent in subtext. We just didn't realize the dialogue was molecular. Picture consciousness as a beach at low tide. The sand, visible thought, stretches wide, solid, dependable. But every so often a wave of microbial inheritance washes over it, carving new patterns before retreating. We call that creativity, emotion, revelation. The sea calls it maintenance. Evolution never stopped sculpting brains. It just outsourced the chisels to chemistry. We're moving sculptures still wet from the tide. And what if free will survives inside that orchestration? Maybe choice isn't an illusion, just collaboration. The microbe suggests, the mind negotiates. Parasite-driven courage becomes human determination. Immune-triggered anxiety turns into intuition. The overlap between manipulation and inspiration is uncomfortable because it erases our favorite binary, control versus autonomy. Yet that tension may be what consciousness is, awareness of the push and pull, the dance between signal and self. Without outside influence, thought would be static, and static things don't evolve. Here's an unsettling thought dressed as flattery. Intelligence might be the ocean's most efficient remote sensing system. Every human mind is a droned planet built to keep track of itself, collecting impressions, generating stories, sending feedback into the biosphere that created it. Waves influence neurons. Neurons invent ships. Ships stir the sea. Feedback complete. The distinction between controller and controlled vanishes into recursion. It's absurd and beautiful at once. The same network that instructs plankton to bloom and fish to spin eventually composes symphonies about feeling small before the sea. That's not coincidence. It's narrative closure on a planetary scale. The system became self-aware and started writing metaphors about itself. Every artist staring at waves for inspiration continues an ancient feedback loop. Ocean to microbe, microbe to body, body to story, story back to ocean. Nature found a way to keep speaking, and we call it creativity. Humanity's task, then, isn't to escape its biological strings, but to play them consciously. Recognize the ocean's input in your moods, the microbial fingerprints on your masterpieces, the tidal timing of your impulses. Don't resent it. Collaborate. Awareness transforms manipulation into partnership. The difference between a zombie and a symbiote is simply comprehension. So maybe mind control was the wrong phrase all along. What we're witnessing is planetary cognition distributed across scales, the ocean thinking through us as readily as through plankton. That idea used to live in temples devoted to sea gods. Now it lives in research papers full of RNA sequences. The sacred and the scientific merged quietly while nobody was looking. At the end of this long dive, look at the horizon again. The water shimmers, brain-like, translating sunlight into motion. Somewhere behind your eyes, similar waves translate electricity into thought. Two reflections facing each other, endlessly recursive, the ocean dreaming of itself through you. Free will or feedback loop? Probably both. The slow-motion revelation is that those options were never separate. The sea hasn't finished evolving minds. It's still at it, methodically, molecule by molecule, thought by borrowed thought. So that's the quiet secret all of this evidence has been whispering toward. Consciousness isn't a detached spark floating above biology. It's a ripple traveling through it. Every cell in the body, every microbe outside it, participates in the same conversation about survival, curiosity, and balance. The ocean merely started speaking first. We're fluent now, but we mistake fluency for independence. It's humbling to realize the boundary between nature and mind was always arbitrary. The molecules composing desire, ambition, even skepticism are older than vertebrates born in seawater long before language. What you call a sudden insight may be chemistry repeating a rhythm it has practiced for eons. That doesn't make your thought less yours. It just means you is a longer story than any individual lifetime could tell. In a sense, humanity never left the ocean. it condensed it. Every heartbeat mirrors the surge of a tide. Every nervous impulse echoes the flicker of plankton in morning light. We are sediments that learn self-awareness, and that awareness is still saturated with salt, still conductive to the same electrical whispers guiding fish, algae, and viral clouds. When you stand near the water and feel clarity rising, that isn't mysticism, it's resonance. This changes how free will feels, but not what it means. Autonomy isn't absolute control, it's participation with insight. Recognizing influence doesn't erase the chooser, it educates the choice. You breathe in sea air packed with invisible life, and instead of fearing contamination, you might thank the planet for a firmware update. Behavior, after all, is just the ecosystem thinking through bodies. The ocean's thoughts arrive as mood, instinct, or inspiration. Our reply is action. Maybe that's the point evolution's been edging toward, awareness as collaboration. The microbes learn persistence, the hosts learn perspective, and occasionally both invent art. Whatever ancient intelligence first pulsed in saltwater never disappeared. It diversified assembled voices like yours to continue the dialogue in words instead of waves. Every question we ask about origins completes the feedback loop. The sea wonders what it became, and we answer by wondering. So the next time you crave sushi, stare at the horizon, or let the surf lull your mind blank, remember, those impulses aren't trivial. They are ancestral messages delivered in serotonin and static, reminders that you're still part of the planetary nervous system. The ocean doesn't just shape tides, it shapes thought, continuously, patiently, through chemistry more elegant than theology. That's the joke and the invitation. You can treat this as cosmic horror or cosmic intimacy. Either way, the story ends beautifully. The sea wrote its memory into you, and you learn to call that memory intellect. Every idea, every melody, every act of empathy is saltwater remembering itself. If that realization leaves a shiver, let it. That's recognition rising from the deep, the collective pulse of a billion microscopic storytellers urging their latest vessel to keep wondering. So subscribe, stay curious, and next time you feel the ocean calling, maybe listen. It's not asking for worship. It's just checking in on how its favorite experiment, the thinking wave that calls itself human, is coming along.